I always believed that if you ticked all the right boxes, life would be like one of those glossy magazine covers. Perfect, enviable, complete. That's what I had. Or so it seemed. As I stood in our sprawling kitchen, sunlight streaming through the bay windows, I marveled at the irony of my life. To anyone peering through those windows, my husband, Mark, and I were the epitome of marital bliss. Jenna, you've outdone yourself with this quiche, Mark said, his voice warm with appreciation. His clean-cut features, accentuated by the morning light, made him look like someone straight out of a high-end fashion ad. I forced a smile, my hands busy arranging the freshly baked quiche on our pristine marble countertop. It's nothing, really, just something I whipped up, I replied, my voice a practiced melody of domestic contentment. Mark wrapped his arms around me from behind, planting a gentle kiss on my cheek. You're amazing. You know that? He whispered, his breath warm against my skin. I nodded, a hollow feeling gnawing at my insides. There was a time when his touch would set my world ablaze, but now, it felt like a well-rehearsed part of our daily routine. As he left for work, immaculately dressed in his bespoke suit, our neighbors, the Thompsons, waved at us from across the street. Their envious smiles said it all. We were the perfect couple, living in the perfect house, in the perfect neighborhood. But the truth was far from it. Once alone, the silence of the house engulfed me. I wandered through the rooms, each one impeccably decorated, a testament to our successful upper-middle-class life. But as I ran my fingers over the Italian leather couch, a sense of emptiness crept in. I thought back to the early days of our marriage, filled with passion and spontaneous adventures. Now, our conversations were limited to work schedules, social events, and the occasional holiday planning. We were like well-oiled cogs in a machine, efficient but devoid of any real connection. I sat down at the piano, a grand Steinway that was more a piece of decor than an instrument. As my fingers danced over the keys, playing a melody from a forgotten time, I closed my eyes. The music was a gateway to a past filled with laughter, love, and genuine happiness. A single tear escaped my eye, tracing a silent path down my cheek. Mommy, are you playing for me? A tiny voice pulled me back to reality. It was our daughter, Lily, her bright eyes filled with innocent wonder. I quickly wiped away the tear and turned to her with a smile. Of course, sweetheart, would you like to hear a song? As I played her favorite lullaby, her giggles filled the room, momentarily piercing the veil of my loneliness. In her, I found a fleeting respite from the turmoil within. But as the day progressed and Lily left for her ballet class, the silence returned, heavier than before. I realized, amidst the quiet echoes of our grand home, that I was living a life many dreamed of but few would envy if they knew the truth. I was a prisoner of perfection, trapped in a gilded cage of my own making. And the worst part? I had no idea how to escape. Life has a funny way of throwing you curveballs when you least expect it. For me, that curveball came in the form of Alex, the new guy at work. It was a Tuesday, just another mundane day at the office, until he walked in. Alex, with his disarming smile and an air of confidence that was hard to ignore. Jenna, this is Alex, our new project manager. My boss introduced us. His hand felt warm and sure in mine, a stark contrast to the cold, predictable touches I'd grown accustomed to. Nice to meet you, Jenna. I've heard great things about you, Alex said, his eyes lingering on mine a moment longer than necessary. I brushed off the flutter in my stomach as mere politeness, but who was I kidding? There was an undeniable spark, an electric current that ran through me, awakening something I thought had long since died. I found myself looking forward to work, a place I had associated with monotony for so long. Alex's presence was like a breath of fresh air, and our conversations, initially about work, gradually became more personal. His laughter was infectious, his stories captivating, and his subtle flirts, though risky, were thrilling. One evening, after a successful project completion, our team decided to celebrate. The night was filled with laughter and drinks, and somehow, Alex and I ended up alone. Just one dance, he whispered, his hand extended toward me. I knew it was wrong, but in that moment, all my reservations melted away. As we danced, his hands on my waist, mine around his neck. The rest of the world faded away. It was exhilarating, dangerous, and utterly irresponsible. I went home that night, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. I told myself it was just a dance, nothing more. But deep down, I knew it was the beginning of something far more complicated. Over the next few weeks, our encounters became more frequent, more intimate. The guilt was always there, nagging at the back of my mind, but I pushed it aside. I convinced myself that a brief affair wouldn't hurt anyone. After all, my marriage was nothing more than a well-orchestrated show. This, this was real, or so I wanted to believe. It was during one of our clandestine meetings that I had my first slip. Mark called, and I ignored it, too caught up in the moment. But when I finally checked my phone, my heart sank. He had left several messages, worried because I hadn't come home from my overtime work. I fabricated a story about a delayed project and a dead phone battery. Mark bought it, or at least, he didn't question it further. But the close call shook me. The reality of what I was doing hit me hard. I was playing with fire, risking everything for a fleeting moment of happiness. As I lay in bed that night, Mark's steady breathing beside me, a part of me wanted to confess, to end this madness. But another part, a darker, more selfish part, wasn't ready to let go of the thrill that Alex brought into my life. I was walking a tightrope, and I couldn't help but wonder when I would inevitably fall. It's bizarre how quickly things spiral out of control, how a single misstep can send you tumbling down a rabbit hole. That's exactly what happened with me and Alex. Our affair, once a thrilling escape, had turned into an obsession, blurring the lines between right and wrong. I began to neglect my responsibilities, both at work and home. Texts from Alex were answered immediately, no matter what I was doing. I started making up excuses to see him, excuses that were thin veils over my recklessness. Mark, ever the attentive husband, started to pick up on the changes. It was the little things at first, missed dinners, forgotten conversations, and my constant distraction. I could see the confusion in his eyes, turning slowly into suspicion. Is everything all right, Jenna? You seem distant lately, Mark asked one evening, his voice laced with concern. Just tired, that's all. I brushed it off with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. But the guilt, like a heavy chain around my neck, was getting harder to ignore. Mark wasn't convinced. I could feel his gaze on me, searching for answers I wasn't ready to give. He started doing his own digging, piecing together my lies and half-truths. The man I thought was too loving to ever suspect me of betrayal was slowly uncovering the truth. One night, I came home late from another secret rendezvous with Alex, my mind a whirlwind of conflicted emotions. As I opened the door, the sight that greeted me froze me in my tracks. There sat Mark, in the dimly lit living room. An array of photos and messages spread out on the coffee table, undeniable evidence of my affair. His face was a mix of anger, pain, and betrayal. Mark, words failed me as I stood there, caught in the act. So, it's true then? His voice was calm, but I could hear the underlying tremor. How long, Jenna? The confrontation was like a slap in the face, a wake-up call to the reality I had been avoiding. I wanted to deny it, to run away from the mess I had created. But the truth was there, staring me in the face. It started a few months ago. I'm so sorry, Mark. My voice was barely a whisper, choked with tears. Sorry, you destroy our marriage, and all you can say is sorry. The hurt in his eyes was something I will never forget. We talked, or rather, he talked, and I listened. Mark poured out his feelings, the hurt, the betrayal, the disbelief. I had shattered his trust, the very foundation of our marriage. As he spoke, the realization of what I had done began to sink in. I had risked everything for a fleeting affair, hurting the one person who had always been there for me. That night, I lay awake in our bed, Mark on the far side, a chasm between us. The life I had so carefully built was crumbling around me, and I had no one to blame but myself. The next morning, Mark was gone, off to clear his head, leaving me alone with my guilt and a marriage hanging by a thread. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that regret is a formidable adversary. It clings to you, a constant reminder of what you've lost. And right now, It's my unrelenting companion. After Mark left, saying he needed time to think, the house felt more like a tomb than a home. The silence was deafening, broken only by the ticking of the clock and the occasional distant laughter of children playing outside, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. I tried reaching out to Mark, sending him texts, leaving voicemails, but he remained unreachable, his silence more painful than any words of anger. I knew I had hurt him deeply, but the extent of the damage was becoming more apparent with each passing day. The guilt was overwhelming. I spent hours sitting in the living room, staring at the photos of us on the walls, memories of a happier time. I realized how much I had taken for granted, how foolishly I had risked everything for a fleeting thrill. Alex, the man I thought was an escape, turned out to be just a catalyst for my downfall. When I told him about the confrontation with Mark, expecting support or at least some understanding, he was indifferent. It was fun while it lasted, he said, shrugging it off. The realization that I was nothing more than a temporary diversion for him was a bitter pill to swallow. The days turned into weeks. I tried to keep myself busy, to fill the void left by Mark's absence. I threw myself into work, but it was no use. My concentration was shot, my work suffered, and soon my boss called me in for a talk. "Jenna, your performance has been slipping. Is everything all right?" he asked, concern in his eyes. I wanted to pour my heart out, to tell him everything, but I held back. "I'm going through some personal issues. I'll try to do better," I managed to say. My social life, once a whirlwind of dinners and parties, came to a standstill. Friends who once envied my perfect life now whispered behind my back. I became a pariah, my affair the juicy gossip at cocktail parties. The few who did reach out did so out of curiosity rather than genuine concern. Evenings were the hardest. The house, once filled with laughter and love, now echoed with the ghosts of my past mistakes. I would sit by the window, watching as the world moved on without me, lost in a sea of regret. I tried to make amends, to find some way to fix the unfixable. But every attempt felt like trying to patch up a dam with a piece of tape. The more I tried, the more everything seemed to crumble around me. I realized that in my pursuit of something I thought I was missing, I had lost everything that truly mattered. Mark, my anchor, the love of my life, was now a stranger, his absence a gaping hole in my existence. I lay awake at night, the weight of my actions crushing me. The realization that I was the architect of my own misery was a haunting thought. The road to redemption seemed impossible, a path shrouded in uncertainty and pain. But it was a path I knew I had to take, not just for Mark, but for myself. In the aftermath of a storm, they say the sun eventually shines. But in the wake of my personal hurricane, all I could see were clouds. And then came the news that pierced through the fog like a cold, hard blade. I remember the day vividly. The morning had started like any other in my new, solitary existence. But as I sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee, the doorbell rang, slicing through the quiet. Standing at the door was a courier with an envelope. "Jenna Reynolds?" he asked. I nodded, a sense of foreboding washing over me. As I tore open the envelope, my hands trembled. Inside were legal papers. Mark was filing for divorce. I sank to the floor, the papers slipping from my fingers. The finality of it all hit me like a tidal wave. This was real. Mark was moving on, and he was doing it through the cold, impersonal channels of the law. The man I thought would forgive me, who I thought was too loving to ever leave, was proving me wrong in the most definitive way possible. But it wasn't just the divorce. Mark was seeking a substantial part of our shared assets. It was his right, of course. He had contributed as much as I had to our life together, if not more. But the realization that he was serious about cutting all ties was a bitter pill to swallow. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on who Mark really was. For years, I had painted him in my mind as the steady, predictable one. But now, faced with the end of our marriage, I began to see a different side of him. Mark, the man I married, was more than just a loving husband. He was strong, decisive, and had a depth I had never truly appreciated. His actions now showed a man who was not just hurt, but also resilient, determined to rebuild his life without me. I learned that he had started new hobbies, things he never would have done before. He joined a hiking group, something I would have never imagined him doing. He was exploring life on his own terms, finding a new identity beyond being my husband. As the legal battle progressed, we met a few times, always in the presence of our lawyers. Gone was the warmth in his eyes when he looked at me. In its place was a polite indifference that stung more than any words of anger could have. During these meetings, I watched him, this new version of Mark. He was confident, articulate, and knew exactly what he wanted. It was as if I was seeing him for the first time, and the realization that I had lost someone so special was crushing. I remember one particular meeting where our eyes met across the table. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the old Mark, the one who used to look at me with so much love. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a steely resolve. As I left that meeting, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of loss, not just for the marriage that was ending, but for the man I had never fully known or appreciated. I had taken him for granted, and now he was showing me, in the world, who he really was. In the quiet of my now too big house, I pondered over the many facets of Mark that had remained hidden from me. It was a sobering thought that sometimes we don't truly see the people closest to us until we're about to lose them. Never did I imagine that loneliness could have such a biting chill. Since the news of the divorce and my affair had spread, my social circle had shrunk to a dot. Friends, once a phone call away, now crossed the street to avoid me. The community I thought was mine had sided with Mark, their cold shoulders speaking volumes of my fallen grace. I remember walking into our favorite cafe, a place where Mark and I had shared countless brunches, only to be met with icy stares. The whispers were like daggers. "That's her, the one who cheated on Mark." Each word stung, a reminder of the life I had so carelessly thrown away. But the most jarring blow came when I learned the truth about Alex. The man I had risked everything for was not the person I thought he was. Through overheard conversations and uncomfortable truths from mutual acquaintances, I learned about his history of short-lived affairs, each ending in a similar pattern. I was just another notch on his belt, a realization that filled me with disgust and self-loathing. The day I confronted Alex, I saw him for who he truly was. His charming facade crumbled, revealing a manipulative man who preyed on vulnerability. "What did you expect, Jenna? We were just having fun," he said nonchalantly, his words cutting through me. Walking away from him, from that chapter of my life, was both painful and liberating. The pain came from acknowledging my foolishness, but the liberation came from shedding the illusion I had clung to. In the following weeks, I spent a lot of time alone, my thoughts my only company. I would sit by the window, watching the world go by, reflecting on the choices I had made. The house, once a symbol of my perfect life, now felt like a prison, each room echoing with memories of a past I could never return to. This solitude forced me to confront the ugly truths about myself. I had been selfish, chasing after a mirage of excitement, completely oblivious to the destruction I was leaving in my wake. I had hurt Mark, the man who had given me nothing but love and loyalty. I had tarnished my reputation, lost friends who had been part of my life for years. It was during these moments of introspection that I truly began to understand the depth of my mistake. I had taken my life for granted, my loving husband, my beautiful daughter, my friends. I had thrown it all away for a fleeting thrill, and now I was paying the price. But amidst the ruins of my life, I found a flicker of hope. It was the realization that as long as I was breathing, it was not too late to change. I began reading, writing, trying to find solace in the words of those who had walked this path of regret before me. I started therapy, a difficult but necessary step towards healing. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, I found a certain peace in my solitude. It was a hard-earned peace, born out of the chaos I had created. I knew the road ahead would be long and challenging, but for the first time in a long while, I felt ready to walk it. Not to undo the past, but to build a better future, one where I was fully aware of the value of everything and everyone I had taken for granted. Hitting rock bottom has a way of stripping away the veneer from life, leaving you face to face with the rawest version of yourself. That's where I found myself when I lost my job. The scandal of my affair had seeped into every corner of my life, tarnishing my professional reputation beyond repair. I remember sitting in my now far too quiet home office, the echoes of my former boss's words still bouncing around in my head. I'm sorry, Jenna, but the company can't be associated with this kind of scandal. Just like that, my career, something I had worked so hard for, vanished into thin air. It was in that moment of utter desolation, surrounded by the remnants of my shattered life, that clarity struck me like a bolt of lightning. I needed to change, not for Mark, not for anyone else, but for myself. I was at a crossroads, and the path I chose now would define the rest of my life. The journey of self-improvement is never a straight line, and mine was no exception. I started therapy, confronting the demons of my past and the insecurities that had led me down this destructive path. The sessions were tough, often leaving me emotionally drained, but with each one, I felt a little more weight lifting from my shoulders. Reconnecting with old friends was another hurdle. Many were hesitant at first, their trust in me understandably shaken, but slowly, through coffee meetups and heartfelt conversations, I started to mend some of the bridges I had burned. There were small victories, moments that shone like beacons of hope in my otherwise stormy world. I started freelance work, finding solace in the routine and purpose it brought. I also began volunteering at a local community center, an experience that opened my eyes to the struggles and triumphs of others. But the most unexpected help came from an old acquaintance, Lisa, whom I had known in passing but never really connected with. She reached out to me, having gone through her own set of challenges. Her empathy and understanding were like a balm to my weary soul. We became each other's support system, our friendship a testament to the power of second chances. Through these experiences, I began to rediscover my self-worth, not as a wife or a high-flying executive, but as Jenna, flawed, resilient, and evolving. I learned to find joy in the little things. A well-written article, a smile from a stranger, the satisfaction of the weight of his name tag pressed against my scrubs. John, it read in crisp, black letters. A name that used to send a thrill of warmth through me, now a dull ache instead. 10 years of marriage, and it had come to this. Me sneaking off to the hospital cafeteria, praying he wouldn't spot me. See, the thing about routines is, they're sneaky. You get so used to the rhythm. His socks dumped next to the hamper. The way he always left a half-eaten breakfast on the counter, that you barely noticed them. Until one day, those tiny irritations are suffocating. The air in our apartment felt thick with them. Maybe you should take some time off. You've been working like crazy, I'd suggested, trying for casual concern, hoping he'd get the hint. Focusing on a new project, that sounded good, didn't it? Like a chance for him to get a spark back. Instead, his puppy dog eyebrows knitted together, that little crease appearing between them. You want me gone? Hurt, laced with confusion. He didn't see it. The way my shoulders slumped with responsibility, the tired circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. The first few nights alone were bliss. Takeout and cheesy reality TV. The remote all mine. I went out with Sarah and the girls, drinks that went down too smooth, laughs that felt genuine again. But when I'd crawl into bed, the silence stretched on forever. It was a cold kind of lonely, one that seeped into your bones. That's how someone like Mark slithers into your life. I started going to the gym, anything to combat that restless energy coiling up inside me. He had this booming voice, the kind that commands a room, and a confidence I'd never possessed. A far cry from John's quiet reliability. How about I take you out, show you a real steak dinner? He'd grinned after spotting me struggling through a set of squats. The place he suggested was all dark wood and low lighting, the complete opposite of the cozy little Italian place John and I always ended up at. At first, the thrill of it all drowned out that nagging feeling at the back of my mind. The way Mark steered the conversation, always had a new cocktail bar recommendation, a flashy story to tell. I liked the way he made me feel noticed, the way I started putting in more effort with my outfits. He was like a shot of adrenaline after years of sipping lukewarm coffee. But adrenaline fades. And what's left, sometimes, is the jitters. The sneaking glances at my phone, expecting another text from John asking when I'd be home. The way I'd flinch whenever a car door slammed outside, convinced he'd caught on, ready to confront me. I was trapped. Trapped by my own stupid choices, by a thrill that had gone sour, and the suffocating realization that maybe what I had with John wasn't so bad after all. My phone dinged in the middle of Zumba class, a jolt of panic piercing through the thumping pop music. It was a picture from John, our cat, sprawled upside down on John's favorite armchair, the one I always nagged him not to sit on because of cat hair. It was so mundane, and yet my stomach twisted. Guilt, or maybe fear, I didn't even know anymore. Mark waited after class, that eager grin plastered across his face. Tonight, let's do something really special, he purred, draping an overly muscled arm across my shoulders. Normally the attention would have thrilled me, but after John's text, it just felt heavy. Yet, somehow, I heard myself agreeing to whatever fancy restaurant he had in mind. The place was all white tablecloths and waiters who seemed to glide instead of walk. I clutched my wine glass too tightly, staring at the menu but the words swimming before my eyes. Mark's voice was a constant buzz, and all I could think was how quiet it used to be with John. A comfortable kind of quiet. You're hardly eating a thing. Mark frowned, concern etched on his chiseled features. Or maybe it was suspicion, I wasn't sure. Everything felt like it was teetering on the edge. The walk back to my place should have been short, but Mark lingered, his cologne too strong in the cool night air. At my door, he leaned in, the kiss not a question. It was hot, messy, nothing like the gentle way John used to kiss me. And for a terrifying, intoxicating second, I kissed back. Then, like a bucket of ice water to the face, reality crashed in. My apartment seemed foreign. The photos of John and me grinning on the side table, the throw I'd knitted for his birthday draped over the couch. Had it always been so? Him? You okay? John asked later that night when I finally worked up the courage to glance at my phone. I choked, a pathetic excuse bubbling up about a rough day at work. His response was a simple thumbs-up emoji. It was so stupid, so basic, and yet, a wave of longing washed over me so strong I almost dropped the phone. The "Hi" text hovered on the screen. Pathetic, desperate, but I couldn't delete it. I needed him to know something, just that I wasn't completely gone. My brother, bless his overly protective soul, cornered me at the grocery store. "What the hell are you playing at?" he hissed, the frozen peas in our basket forgotten. Rumors, apparently, were swirling. And of course, he thought John deserved better. My brother had always been Team John, even when I was starting to doubt the whole thing. Later, Mark's texts turned from sweet nothings to sharp accusations. "You seeing someone else?" they demanded. I panicked, firing back a denial, but the seed of doubt was planted. The Mark I'd thought was so exciting suddenly seemed dangerous, all sharp edges and possessiveness. Had I been a fool? Had John seen this side of Mark, something I'd blindly missed? My quiet apartment no longer felt like a sanctuary, but a prison of my own making. I swear the coffee machine was mocking me. It coughed and sputtered, sputtering out a pathetic drizzle into my "World's Best Mom" mug, a souvenir from a family vacation, back when those words held any truth. I tried to ignore it, the way I tried to ignore everything lately, but my reflection in the chipped mug was impossible to avoid. There she was, the woman who ruined everything. Eyes bloodshot, hair in a messy bun, the woman who'd traded John's comforting presence for this. And then she showed up to work of all places, that same woman from John's anniversary picture. Her name was Christine, all sleek heels and perfectly styled hair. We ended up in the cramped break room at the same time. "Nice to finally put a face to the name," she'd said, the words dripping with fake sweetness. Was she baiting me, testing the waters? My hands were shaking as I poured a truly awful cup of coffee. I tried to play it cool, like I didn't know a thing about her and Mark, but my voice quivered when I asked how she knew my husband. A flicker of surprise, then that perfect smile. "Oh, John's such a sweetheart. Brought me flowers when I started. Said you pick them out yourself." I felt sick. John, buying flowers for another woman? It was a punch to the gut, a vivid reminder that I'd messed up royally, and my stupid break had rippled out further than I ever expected. Later, Sarah, my best friend, dragged me to a bar I'd never been to, the kind with overpriced drinks and names I couldn't pronounce. She ordered strong cocktails, a worried frown creasing her forehead. One drink led to another, and it tumbled out of me. Mark, the kiss, the guilt that threatened to eat me alive. Sarah, God love her, didn't sugarcoat it. You're an idiot, she said bluntly, but then hugged me with that fierce loyalty only a best friend could offer. But you're my idiot. Let's fix this. Mark showed up at my door that night, a bouquet of embarrassingly huge lilies in his hand. Thought you needed cheering up, he said, a smirk tugging at his lips. Did he know? Was it a power play? My apartment had never felt smaller, his presence suffocating. His solution to everything, it seemed, was distraction. Dinner reservations I couldn't afford, tickets to a concert with ear-splitting music, and then the party. It was at his friend's penthouse, the kind of place I only saw on TV. It was sensory overload, too much perfume, too much champagne, and too many people I didn't know, their laughter echoing off the marble floors. Clutching a cheap glass of bubbly, I searched desperately for something familiar. But Mark was in his element, surrounded by his flashy friends, leaving me adrift. That's when I saw it. Christine, in a dress that seemed painted onto her, laughing at one of his jokes. A surge of anger, hot and bitter, rose in my throat. This was it. This was the world I'd craved. It was a cold, shiny shell, and I didn't belong. Back home, the silence was deafening. My John-shaped hole in the bed was unbearable. In a fit of desperation, of self-hatred, I typed out, "Are you okay?" Hitting send was like free falling without a parachute. His answer was a single word, "Tomorrow." My heart sank. Of course, he was okay. He was probably basking in some glorious post-me life, a life with sensible Christine and flower deliveries. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. It was the final, crushing confirmation that I'd broken something precious beyond repair. My stomach churned as I turned onto Elm Street. This wasn't our usual cafe filled with the scent of roasted beans and friendly baristas. It was sterile, like a waiting room before a root canal appointment, a fitting place for whatever fresh hell John had in store for me. He was waiting at a corner table, looking infuriatingly good. Gone was the rumpled softness I was used to. His hair was shorter, his jawline sharper. There was a new watch on his wrist, a sleek, expensive thing that screamed, "I'm moving on." It made my insides twist into a knot of shame and something else, something prickling. Was that a flicker of attraction? You wanted to talk? His usual gentle tone was gone, replaced by an icy coolness. My pathetic apologies died on my tongue. He wasted no time. Every word stung like a slap. The lonely nights he'd apparently spent on the couch, his worry turning to a cold sort of anger. It was worse than I'd imagined. My selfishness thrown back at me in brutal clarity. And always, there was the phantom presence of Mark hovering between us. Then it came. The mention of Mark, but twisted, tainted. John spoke of threats, of knowing about Mark's temper. A memory flashed. Mark's face contorted in rage after one too many drinks, the way he'd slammed the door when I tried to calm him down. Had John known all along? Had I been that foolish? And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, the word, lawyer, hung between us like a death sentence. Papers, protection? Suddenly, it wasn't about saving our marriage, it was about damage control. The role reversal was a punch to the gut. I'd always been the practical one, and here I was, a stuttering mess, while John exuded cold competence. I almost choked when he picked up the bill, the casual gesture laden with symbolism. Had I become his latest charity case? He didn't offer a goodbye hug, just a stiff nod and a curt, "My lawyer will be in touch." Then, he was gone, leaving me to stare at the dregs of my lukewarm latte, a fitting reflection of my shattered life. The walk back to my car was a blur. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall in this impersonal place. With each step, the weight of my choices pressed down on me. This wasn't some spicy fling, some drama to shake up our lives. It was a chasm I'd created, and now I was teetering precariously on the edge, with no John to catch me if I fell. The first text came like a sucker punch. "Why are you ignoring me? Is this some kind of game?" Mark's tone, once playful, was laced with anger. More followed, each one sharper than the last, the accusations a sickening symphony. "Liar, playing mind games, making him look crazy. Suddenly, the fear that had been simmering on the back burner bubbled over, turning into an icy dread. Had he done more than send angry texts? Had he reached out to John, to Christine, to my friends? At the coffee shop where I worked, Sarah looked at me with a mixture of pity and worry. "You've gotten so thin," she said quietly, pushing a muffin towards me. I didn't even try to protest. I wasn't just thin, I felt hollow, like the consequences of my choices were eating me alive. The whispers started next. At first, it was nothing more than raised eyebrows at parties I was no longer invited to, sidelong glances at the grocery store. But then the questions began. "How are you holding up?" asked in that fake, sympathetic voice, implying a breakdown was imminent. People I'd considered friends shared gossip disguised as concern. Stories about wild nights out, erratic behavior, the implication of some deep instability lurking beneath the surface. Each twisted half-truth felt like a fresh cut. This was Mark's doing, a smear campaign designed to ruin me before I could expose him. The worst, though, was the change I sensed in my parents. When my mom called, there was a forced cheeriness to her voice, quickly followed by a heavy silence. Dad, usually full of silly jokes, now only asked about practical things. My apartment, bills, like they expected me to crumble any minute. In the echoing quiet of my apartment, it hit me. Mark wasn't just some obstacle anymore. He was a threat. But worse, this was on me. All of it. It was the culmination of my stupidity, my carelessness, my desperation to be anything other than who I was. And now, I was paying the price. The sobs ripped out of me with a force that scared even myself. Raw, ugly, the kind of crying you only do when you've truly hit rock bottom. In the aftermath, sticky and shaking, there was a flicker of clarity. I couldn't run anymore. I couldn't hide. It was time to fight. Mrs. Peterson, my iron-willed high school English teacher, became an unlikely ally. "It takes more than tears to fix this mess," she said bluntly when I appeared, red-eyed and desperate, at her office. No comforting platitudes, just harsh truths. It was exactly what I needed. Fueled by anger and a newfound resolve, I spent the night hunched over my laptop, scrolling through old messages, digging up emails with Mark. Every flirtatious text, every veiled thread became ammunition. My hands trembled when I dialed the number for the women's shelter Sarah had suggested. The lawyer's voice on the other end of the line was sharp. "No nonsense. Tell me everything," she said, and I did. Finally, I wasn't alone in this. There was a plan, a way to push back, a path out of the nightmare. It was the first time I'd felt a sliver of hope in a long, long time. Mark disappeared from my phone screen. No angry texts, no threats, just eerie silence in the wake of the cease and desist order. It should have felt like a win, a weight lifted. But there was no victory fanfare playing in my head, only a dull ache and the lingering taste of fear. Had I created a monster by fighting back? Sarah threw a half-hearted, "Congrats" party. The girls rallied around me with forced smiles and 2 sweet cocktails. I couldn't match their cheer. I saw it in their eyes, pity disguised as enthusiasm. It was a victory party for something that felt like a defeat. I was no longer Mark's victim, but I was still the architect of my own disaster. The therapist's office, a beige box of a room, became my confessional. She had a way of peeling back my excuses like layers of an onion. "Why did you need a break in the first place?" she asked, her voice clinical yet not unkind. It was a question I hadn't allowed myself to truly answer. I mumbled about John being boring, about wanting excitement, about feeling invisible. But as I stared at the abstract pattern on the carpet, the words tumbled out. My unacknowledged loneliness, the unvoiced dreams I didn't think John would understand, the resentment of doing all the heavy lifting. It was ugly, it was raw, and it was necessary, because somewhere under the anger and hurt, there was an uncomfortable realization. This mess wasn't entirely John's fault. The job offer, the potential fresh start dangling in front of me, felt both exhilarating and terrifying. The call to John was a gut-wrenching exercise in humility. No long explanations, no begging for forgiveness. Just the hard truth about Mark's possessiveness escalating beyond what I'd first admitted. His silence on the other end of the line was heavy. Finally, he spoke. his voice cool and distant. "Thank you for telling me," was all he said. The goodbyes became a blur. Friends offered well-meaning promises to stay in touch. My parents expressed cautious hope that this change would be good for me. No one really got it. No one understood the depth of the mess I'd created, the way it had stained my reputation, the guilt that clung like a second skin. Then, the real gut punch, the confession from Sarah, tears in her eyes. She was the one, out of some misguided loyalty, who had first told John about me and Mark. The betrayal stung, cutting through the numbness. Yet, I also understood the desperation, the twisted love of a friend trying to protect me from myself. It was proof that even good intentions can lead to disastrous consequences. As the taxi pulled away from my old life, the city lights smeared by the rain on the window, the weight of it all finally sunk in. This wasn't just about a new chapter, it was about rewriting the entire book. There was no quick fix, no redemption waiting for me just a few miles down the road. The journey ahead was going to be long and hard, but it was the only way to pick up the pieces of I used to be, who I could maybe, one day, become. Each mile the rented truck ate up was a flashback reel in my head. There was John, his lopsided grin on our first date, and then his face, tight with worry on that godforsaken anniversary night. Mark's laugh morphed into a scowl, a flicker of that twisted rage I tried to forget. My parents' strained smiles, Sarah's tearful confession, they all swirled together, a dizzying blur of joy and regret. My brother's truck pulled up alongside mine at a rest stop, a silent figure emerging. In his hands was a brown paper bag. "Figured you could use the fuel," he said, a gruffness masking something softer. We ate sandwiches on the curb, the silence loaded with unspoken words. It wasn't the grand forgiveness gesture I longed for, but it was a start, a crack in the wall I'd built between myself and the people who truly mattered. The new city hit me with the force of a cold shower. No friendly street corners here, no familiar faces offering waves from coffee shop windows. It was a jumble of unfamiliar buildings, gray skies, and ceaseless traffic. The anonymity was a double-edged sword. I could disappear into the crowd, become a nobody again. But that same nobody was also utterly alone. My new apartment was a testament to fresh starts, mostly bare walls and generic furniture hastily bought online. Unpacking became a ritual of penance. Each photo of me and John was a shard of guilt. Each hastily bought item was a reminder of the life I'd thrown away. I spent evenings lost in the mindless scroll of social media, the laughter of people living far more exciting lives than mine a constant hum in my ears. The first day at work was a whirlwind, unfamiliar faces to memorize, new routines to master, and an underlying fear that someone might recognize me, connect me to the gossip-fueled whispers of my past. But focusing on the tasks at hand became a lifeline. Counting inventory, filing invoices, it was mundane, yet grounding. Then came the flicker of hope that quickly turned into a sickening churn in my stomach. A news alert slid onto my phone, an article about Mark's arrest for fraud and harassment. The details were lurid, the other victims a testament to his pattern of manipulation. My hand hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to devour the details, to revel in the public exposure of the man who'd nearly ruined me. Another part knew that reading it wouldn't bring any satisfaction, only a fresh reminder of my own entanglement in his mess. That night, after a tasteless dinner and a long, hot shower in a bid to wash away the lingering sense of unease, I found myself staring at John's number. I typed out a message, then deleted it. Typed again, finger hovering over the send button. Finally, I hit send. Short, to the point. An apology without excuses, an acknowledgement that he deserved better, and that I'd understand if he wanted nothing more to do with me. As the message disappeared into the ether, it wasn't relief I felt, but rather a deep sense of resignation. The only way through this mess was to walk the long road, one step at a time. Some doors, once closed, would never reopen, and that was a consequence. It's not even my divorce paper, technically. It's his and hers. Their names, printed together like it's some achievement to celebrate. My stomach churns, and I swear, for a moment, the room tilts off its axis. He won't be home for a while. Thank God for small mercies, I guess. I don't think I could look at him right now, not without, well, I don't even know what I do. A tear burns down my cheek, like some kind of twisted joke. I furiously wipe it away. No more of that. He's not worth the waterworks anymore. For a second, I imagine tossing those papers into the fireplace, making this whole mess vanish in a flash of flame. Then there'd be nothing, at least no official record of him and her. I almost laugh, like that would fix anything. I glance out the window, half expecting to see his car pulling into the driveway. Part of me secretly hopes he will, that we can have it out with each other. One big fiery argument, and then I can shut the door on this whole nightmare. But the street is empty. That dull ache at the base of my skull? Yeah, that's here to stay. Finally, I tuck the blasted decree into a drawer, slamming it shut. I've got to get out of here before I lose what's left of my mind. The house still reeks of him, but even worse, it thrums with the memory of her. The perfume I always suspected, the way he'd linger in the doorway after, late nights at work. It's all so damn obvious now. I grab a coffee to go, almost stumbling over the dog. Bless his furry heart. At least someone in this house is always happy to see me. The walk helps, but just a little. It's like my body's on autopilot. My thoughts, though, they're a swirling hurricane inside my head, spinning so fast I can barely breathe. Should I call someone? My brother would be furious on my behalf. My best friend a sobbing mess. Right now, neither sounds appealing. I just need something. A buffer between me and the world. Maybe just a long, long drive. Hell, maybe I won't even come back tonight. I should have known it would end like this. The highway blurs, not from tears this time, but the sheer speed I'm pushing this old car to. Music blasts, some angry female singer I barely recognize, mirroring the scream trapped in my own throat. I need to feel something other than this gnawing hollowness inside. Where am I even going? It doesn't matter. Just away. Away from the house, from him, from all those pitying whispers that would follow me around town. Even now, I imagine them talking, the neighbors, my mom, everyone pretending it doesn't sting. Like I'm not the fool who was blindsided while my phone buzzes. It's him, of course. My hands clench on the wheel, a surge of anger replacing that sickening pit in my stomach for a convince me it's not what I think. For a second, I consider answering, just to rip him a new one. But no, he doesn't get that satisfaction. I toss the phone into the glove compartment, silencing it. He can stew for a while. Miles fly by. Eventually, the adrenaline rush wears off, and exhaustion seeps in. I pull over at a seedy-looking motel, the kind you only stop at when you're desperate. I don't even care. The room is dingy, smells like cigarettes, and the bed sags in the middle. It matches how I feel, so whatever. I collapse on top of the thin covers, not bothering to change. It's only in the grim silence of that room that it fully hits me. Those dinner conversations, the way he'd linger in doorways after, late nights at work, and my own stupid excuses. It's also painfully obvious now, a trail of clues I refuse to see. Was I that blind? Or did I just not want to admit the truth? Sleep, when it finally comes, is fitful and haunted. He's there in my dreams, but his words are twisted, her name echoing from lips that were once mine. I wake with a gasp, tangled in the thin sheets and soaked in sweat. Morning brings zero clarity. My reflection in the grimy bathroom mirror is a stranger. Eyes bloodshot, hair a disaster. This is what he's done to me. Reduced me to this shell of a woman. But mixed with the heartbreak, there's a flicker of something else. Determination? Anger that's not aimed at myself? I grab my stuff and check out with the bored clerk staring at his phone. The sun glares off the asphalt, and my head pounds in protest. Coffee. I need coffee and a plan that doesn't involve running away forever. He might have broken me, but he doesn't get to own the pieces. Time to start putting myself back together. My brother was right. I do deserve better. But right now, just surviving feels like an achievement. I head to a greasy diner where nobody knows me. At the counter, the waitress throws a refill my way without asking. I need the caffeine, but what I really want is oblivion. Something to numb the constant loop of betrayal running through my head. After downing my second coffee, I force myself outside. Deep breaths, one foot in front of the other. It's time to deal with the mess that's become my life. First up, facing the digital ghost of his perfect new relationship. I unlock my phone with shaking hands. Her social media is like a punch in the gut. Every smiling selfie, every carefully staged vacation shot feels calculated to hurt. Did they do this stuff together when he was still with me? I scroll through endless photos, nauseous and fascinated at the same time. I try to analyze their body language, searching for some sign of fakery, but her happiness seems painfully genuine. Then, my mom calls. I let it ring and tell voicemail. I'm not strong enough to pretend everything's okay to answer her worried questions. Maybe tomorrow. For now, I just need to breathe. I try to distract myself, cleaning out my purse, scrolling through old messages. But everything seems tainted with a memory of him. I swipe viciously and realize, with a shock, I've deleted almost everything. Like it's a childish attempt to erase him entirely. The rest of the day is a blur. I pick at takeout food back in my motel room, my eyes drawn to the sheets and the grimy mirror. Every inch of this place now reminds me of his betrayal. This is rock bottom, and there's only one direction to go from here. I force myself to shower, scrubbing away the exhaustion and the stink of despair. When I look in that damned mirror again, I see something different in my eyes. It's not the heartbroken woman from yesterday. There's a flicker of something steely. My siblings will be texting, checking up on me. My mom will call again. I know they're all worried, but I can't handle their pity right now. The only person I can talk to is my best friend. She's the one who knows how to piece me back together. I grab my phone. This time, I answer the call. Her voice, a rush of concern, nearly breaks me. But instead of tears, I find myself talking. It all spills out, the motel, his lies, the damn social media posts. Instead of a sobbing breakdown, what comes out is rage. It burns hot, fueled by the injustice of it all. She doesn't try to sugarcoat it. She cusses him out, then cusses her out too. But through it all, there's a strength in her voice, a certainty that this isn't the end of my story. Maybe she's right. Maybe this is the part where I stop being the victim and start fighting back. My friend was right. Talking it out unleashed this raw energy inside me, a fury that had been buried beneath the shock and the sadness for too long. It's time to take my life back, one damn step at a time. I book a room at a proper hotel. No more seedy motels with their depressing vibes. Small victory, but it feels significant. The next morning, I drive back home. I don't even try to stop myself from blasting angry breakup songs on the radio. Every word about betrayal and starting over echoes exactly how I feel. It's not a healthy soundtrack, but it beats the sound of my own despair. As I pull up to the driveway, a familiar song cuts through the noise in my head. It's our song, the cheesy one he dedicated to me years ago, back when we were stupid happy. I should turn the radio off, but instead, I crank it louder. Every sugary lyric grates against my ears now, a twisted reminder of all the broken promises. Inside the house, the silence is deafening. I half expect to see something different, a sign that this entire nightmare has been a bad dream. Of course, nothing has changed. Even the air still holds a trace of her perfume, a constant, taunting reminder. I force myself upstairs, stealing for the side of the bed we shared. Instead, I open the closet. His side is bare, gone. He cleared his stuff out, the coward. It should make me sad. It should make me even angrier. But instead, it sparks a wicked sort of relief. It's done. Finished. The rest of the day is a whirlwind. Boxes appear as if by magic. Thank you, overprotective brother. And I toss in belongings with reckless abandon. It's an exorcism. Each discarded shirt and crumpled tie another piece of him cast away. Sleep won't come. I find myself on the couch in the dim light, my laptop open, fingers poised over the keyboard. It's time for truth, divorce lawyers, infidelity statistics, how to know it's beyond saving. Each Google search seems to echo with judgment. I tell myself it's just information, but deep down, I know I've already passed the tipping point. Finally, at a truly indecent hour, I type an email to my brother. Lawyer recommendations? Need a good one. I press send, then curl into a tight ball on the couch. I won't sleep tonight, but the decision feels strangely liberating. Later, I'll question if this is the right choice. if I'm being too rash. But tonight, for the first time in ages, something like closure feels within reach. He cheated. He lied. Now, it's my turn to take control. This mess is no longer going to define me. It's going to fuel me. My brother's response comes fast. Got the best. We'll send deets. It's weirdly comforting. The no-nonsense way he treats this like just another problem to solve. I wish I could be so clinical about the whole thing. Later that day, I find myself in some sterile office downtown, sitting across from a woman in a power suit. Her name's Andrea, and her smile is a shark's grin. She talks fast, throws around words I barely understand. Assets, alimony, injunctions. It's overwhelming, a brutal reminder that my life has become a legal battleground. He wants this done quickly and quietly, she explains with a practiced air of sympathy. I'd advise the same, for your sake. Something about her tone grates. Is that a dig at me? It doesn't matter. I just want this over. Clean cut. Leaving the office, I'm nauseous. Every step carries me further away from the life I knew. And that's the point, I remind myself. I chose this. But on the drive home, the panic bubbles up. Have I made a terrible mistake? News travels fast in small towns. People I barely know stop me at the grocery store, offering condolences like I've suffered a death in the family. And maybe, in a way, I have. The death of my marriage, of the future I'd envisioned. My phone buzzes. It's him. My stomach twists. I don't answer, couldn't even if I tried. The voicemail fills me with a mix of disgust and morbid curiosity. His voice is soft, apologetic. It's an act, and I'm no longer fooled. The next morning, his parents are at my door. His mother looks stricken, tears welling in her eyes. His father, stern and stiff, offers only a clipped, "We're so sorry." It feels like an accusation more than an apology, and a flicker of anger sparks inside me. I'm not the one who did this to their precious son. The days bleed together. Friends tentatively reach out, some offering support, others just awkwardly curious. I avoid them all. Each interaction feels like another reminder of what I've lost, what I've become, the pathetic woman everyone pities. Then, it happens. I'm sorting through a box of old stuff when I find it. A necklace I never wore, a cheap heart pendant that reeks of guilt and last-minute panic. I imagine him scouring some tacky display, trying to buy his way out of trouble. Rage surges through me. I hurl the necklace against the wall, and it shatters with a satisfying crash. Tears stream down my face, hot and furious. This is what he's reduced me to. But as the tears flow, something shifts. I feel lighter. The anger burns away the last of the sadness, leaving a hollowed-out space in its wake. Maybe it's a start. I stare at the legal documents Andrea sent. Every page feels like a death sentence. There's a sickening finality to words like settlement and dissolution. With a few scratches of a pen, a lifetime together will be reduced to financial figures and legal jargon. My stomach churns, but I manage to sign. Court is nothing like what I'd imagined from TV dramas. It's drab and bureaucratic. My lawyer and his lawyer talk in hushed tones, and I'm barely a participant in my own life unraveling. He's not even here. Couldn't summon the courage to face me, it seems. The judge's voice is a low drone. Do you understand the terms of this decree? He asks. I want to scream. No, I don't understand any of it. How did I get here? Why am I the one being punished? Instead, I force out a choked yes. The gavel comes down with a thud that echoes in the hollow chamber of my heart. We are no longer us, but adversaries, his name and mine joined only by the versus that separates us. The weight of it all hits me later. Walking alone down those courthouse steps, a cold rain begins to fall. It feels fitting, a pathetic imitation of the silent tears I can no longer shed. My shoulders slump under the onslaught, and for a dangerous moment, I want to give in, to just stand there and let the world wash over me until I disappear entirely. Days turn into nights, blurring together. Andrea calls with updates, her voice devoid of emotion as she outlines the brutal division of our life. His possessions, my possessions, what we fought over, what we gave up. It's a soulless inventory of heartbreak. Then, amidst the bleakness, a tiny flicker of light. It's a simple card from my old high school English teacher. I haven't thought about her in years. Inside, written in her neat script, is a quote. Sometimes falling apart is how you make space to grow. I stare at it, the words seeping in slowly. Growth? It seems like an impossibility. Right now, I feel reduced, broken, but a tiny kernel of something stirs within me. Maybe she's right. Maybe this shattering is a necessary part of some rebuilding I can't yet imagine. I find the energy to start packing up the house. Each box is a weight I am finally shedding. The act of dismantling our life feels oddly empowering. It's a start, a tiny act of control when everything else has spun so wildly beyond my grasp. It's time to create a life that's entirely mine. Whatever that life might look like, it'll be free from the weight of his moving day is a blur of boxes and forced efficiency. This house always felt too big, echoing with a future I never got. Now, it's nothing more than a space I'm eagerly fleeing from. With each item I pack away, I feel a flicker of something resembling hope. The new apartment is small, impersonal. Bare walls and the faint scent of fresh paint speak of potential, but also a daunting emptiness. My brother and best friend help me move, filling the silence with attempts at light-hearted banter. I appreciate the effort, but their cheerfulness feels forced, a stark contrast to the dull ache inside me. Later, alone for the first time in my strange new space, silence descends like a suffocating blanket. I make futile attempts to distract myself, unpacking boxes, arranging furniture. But nothing can drown out the emptiness that echoes louder than any noise. In the dead of night, I find myself on the couch, an old photo album cracked open on my lap. Smiling faces stare back, me and my friends, my parents, me and him. The photos trace the history of our relationship, youthful joy, wedding photos, holidays. With a numb finger, I trace the outline of his face. Who even was this man I thought I knew? The album falls shut, a weight on my chest. Sleep offers no respite, just an endless cycle of betrayal and heartbreak. I wake unrest, the lingering memory of his lies an acidic burn. I try to cry, but even that feels empty now. My brother's voicemail replays in my head. He's not worth the tears. Remember that, it's harsh, but maybe that's what I need right now. A dose of brutal reality. Anger, hot and sharp, finally cuts through the fog of sadness. Enough. Time to reclaim the parts of me he tried to erase. I find his old messages on my phone. With each deleted conversation, I feel a small weight lift. His number goes next. I stare at his name on the screen, my finger hovering over send. Proof of a final, definitive severing. I press the button, and a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow washes over me. In a frenzy, I clear out the rest of his belongings. A forgotten vase, a tacky souvenir from some trip, an old shirt I'd meant to throw out ages ago. All of it finds its way into the trash with ruthless efficiency. Except one thing, that awful heart necklace, the one I found hidden away. Instead of throwing it out, I smash it, taking a perverse pleasure in watching the cheap things shatter. Later, exhausted and trembling, I collapse on the couch. The dog nudges my hand with her wet nose, her eyes full of silent concern. I curl into her warm fur, finally letting the tears flow. It's not the release of despair, but the first step towards healing. Weeks pass in a blur of unpacking and restless nights. My new job at a local bookstore is a welcome distraction. It's simple, quiet, and requires minimal brain power, just what I need right now. I lose myself in the smell of old paper and the comforting weight of books in my hands. One day, skimming the local newspaper, his name jumps out at me. There's a small blurb about his company and some new project. My heart thuds, an involuntary reaction, but the crushing pain I'd expected doesn't come. It's more of a dull ache now, a distant reminder rather than an open wound. Then the box arrives. No return address, just my name scrawled across the top. I hesitate. Should I even open it? But curiosity wins out. Inside, it's a jumble of old stuff. Faded photos, a cheesy souvenir keychain, a concert ticket stub. Reminders of a past that now feels like it belongs to another person entirely. I sort through it all with cold detachment. Most of the items find their way into the trash without a second thought. My hand pauses, however, over a worn postcard from a beach vacation we took years ago. It was before the cracks started to show, before everything fell apart. For a moment, I'm tempted to throw it away, but instead, I tuck it in a drawer. A small token of a happier time, nothing more. The encounter is what I needed. It's a meeting I didn't know I wanted, a chance to confront the past head-on. Outside the cafe, a light drizzle begins. I barely notice until he holds out an umbrella. His touch on my arm sends a ripple of disquiet through me, but it's fleeting. As we navigate the crowded sidewalk, the conversation is stilted, full of the unspoken weight between us. "I'm sorry," he says quietly. "It's not enough. It will never be enough." "I know," is all I manage. No anger, no bitterness, just a quiet acceptance of the truth. We part ways then, his retreating form dissolving into the crowd. I walk away, and something strange happens. I feel lighter than I have in months, as if this accidental meeting has finally loosened a knot I didn't know I still carried. That night, I rage drive. Windows down, music blasting. I scream into the darkness, finally purging the last remnants of heartbreak and fury. Tears stream down my face, but they feel different, cleansing. Then, silence. Not the oppressive silence of before, but a quiet space filled with potential. The next morning, I attack my apartment with newfound determination. Gone are the muted neutrals and the carefully curated decor that mimic magazine pages. In its place bursts vibrant colors, mismatched patterns, and art that speaks to me, not to some image of domestic perfection. It's messy, a bit chaotic,